You know what, don't hold it yet, I need to... I'll time you.
Rebuilding the shocks. The shocks have been rebuilt. I am just setting them back to the normal height, so the springs are at the correct dampening amount. And then, yeah, they'll be going back on the car, and I'm going to be happy.
Brake reservoir out will be on. So that is, as you can see, it's just a straight cut gear. They get damaged very little generally, but it's always good to check. Run your finger along the edges to see if they've been what's called smeared, but these generally straight cut gears are always fine. If you have a helical cut gear, what happens when they mesh at an angle like that? They're obviously got side load on, so they're like basically trying to smear material across them all the time, and they wear out eventually when the material gets moved enough that then the meshing's affected and you get too much backlash, and you can feel that instantly. If you run your finger over, the edges will be really sharp. So you've got your main housing here, which is bolted to the drop gear, so that's all driven. That whole thing is driven forward by the rest of the gearbox. And then in here you've got these two things called ramps. So they've that pattern on. You can see the little ramps up there that the crosspin rides on. So they're splined into that casing, so they're driven. And then the torque reaction against these faces, which is the ramps against the crosspins, produces a thrust force for the pin to push up the ramps. And so the ramps, they're only splined that way so they can slide, and that force on the crosspin pushes up the ramp, pushes the ramps apart, and then the flat machined face is on the other side, which I'll be able to show you. So this face here is then forced sideways, so as a crosspin rides up the ramp it pushes these apart, and this is forced outways inside this casing, and it clamps these two packs. It's basically a wet multi-plate clutch either side. And you've got steel plates which are driven by the same splines in the housing as the ramp, and then friction plates which are attached to the output gears of the diff. They grip together and they're preloaded by what's called a Belleville washer on either side. So that is basically acting as a big spring. That clamps the lot together, and then as that works against the pin, so as the pin rides up the ramp and pushes it, that spring and clamp force clamps the clutches tighter and tighter, both sides, and that's what gives your locking effect. So like the more torque that's applied to the diff or to this gear, the more locking force you have, the more reaction you've got on the pin and the more locking you have against both clutch packs. There's a thing called a friction circle with a tyre when it grips. It's basically a graph of how much longitudinal and lateral load the tyre can take. And so it's just a picture. It's basically an oval because there's more longitudinal force than lateral force generally. That friction circle is increased with load. That's the only way a tyre actually grips anything, is when it's loaded vertically. So when you're turning a corner at speed, you load the tyre on the outside of a car because you have a thing called weight transfer, because the mass of the vehicle is trying to break free on the outer side. You load up the outside tyre, so you've got loads of traction possibly there. But then in a normal open diff, because the speed of the output runs down the path of least resistance, all it does is spin up the inside wheel, which has no load and no grip, and that's what pushes a front wheel drive car wide when it's turning. Because your inner wheel's just spinning there, and that creates like a sideways thrust which pushes the car wide, and the outer tyre that's actually got all of the load on it that could be driving the car isn't providing any traction because it's not being driven by the diff. So that's what this diff gets around, is it can then drive the outside wheel as well, and that's what helps bring the front nose of the car round so they can turn much faster than a car without a limited slip diff. So yeah, that's the science behind it basically. And then you've got, I think I explained to the others the other day, there's two different setup options. You can see you've got 90-33 or 80-45 on the ramp angles. So when M Sport homologated this, they'll have developed those and tested different options and decided those are the two options that they wanted for this car. So a rally engineer will have a spreadsheet where they calculate diff locking torque, like required locking torque for a certain chassis setup, because how it integrates with the rest of the car is quite important. And all of these parameters, so the ramp angles on acceleration and deceleration, and then how many friction faces you've got, and then the what's called the diff preload, which we can only adjust here by changing the torque of these bolts that are locked down. But on a four-wheel drive car, you can actually, there's like a preload nut on this diff pack. You can set that separately, so you can adjust it like nearly infinitely. And that's something they'll adjust quite a lot. So it's like the starting locking torque before you apply any torque to the diff. And that affects, all of those parameters affect, like, you're basically swinging between a car that's really nimble and able to turn a lot and weave around the place, and then a car that's got a lot of traction. Because if you've got, you know, effectively the one end of the scale is a solid locked axle, which is giving all of its speed all the time to both wheels, or the other end you've got a completely open diff that then will just send speed to the path of least resistance. And that means that car will be really nimble and be able to turn quick, but as soon as you want to accelerate anywhere, it won't go anywhere. And vice versa, the other car in a straight line or like more open corners will be really fast because it can accelerate, but then when it gets tight twisty stuff, so there's always a compromise, basically. You know, you can't be, like a lot of people say, oh yeah, just weld the diff up and that's great, and you're like, but then you come to trying to turn around a hairpin or something, it doesn't really work.
Is changing it more to driver preference, or does the engineer pick it?
Bit of both. Like as with any setup, you've got to work together with driver and engineer to find where the performance is, because driver styles change a little bit, and between different chassis, different cars behave. You know, you're saying, yeah, we change the diff ramps or the preload of a diff, but there's a lot of other affecting factors, like the dampers obviously work with that because they're also controlling tyre load at the same time. So like all the time the car's working together as a package. So you, as an engineer, you've got to like understand the pros and the cons of all of these bits, and then make the chassis you've got work really well for the driver you've got. There is never ever a this is faster, do this. You know, you can't just look at a spreadsheet and go, yeah, these numbers, they're good. Next thing we're going to do is pull this all to bits and wash all of these as we do with all the other parts. But we need to make sure it all goes back in the right place. So what we're going to do, just want to write down which ramp angle it was in. $33.90, and then I'm going to take a picture of it that way because we need to get the acceleration and deceleration ramp right way around. And then these, same as all the other parts in the diff, you just need to give them a good check. All of these, again, just want to check they're pretty bulletproof, to be fair. It's very rare that we would change them, especially again, like I said, this gearbox is very understressed in this car. This is again a bit of a lower cost option with a 2-part cross pin, but the disadvantage you get is there's a bit of slop there, so the whole thing has a bit more slop. Higher performance diffs will have a fixed single part. Gone through gears already, so we'll give that a crack check once it's cleaned. Again, this is very understressed in this gearbox, but you always want to just look right down in here. All these splines are nice and clean and free, and we'll probably get some Scotch-Brite in there just to make sure they're definitely okay. Again, no sharp edges, you've got lots of stuff running up and down, moving, and
so we're just crack checking to see if there's any cracks formed at the moment. So first you clean them with either contact clean or wet clean, it's the same thing pretty much. Then you spray some red dye on it, like this. Don't get it on your skin. Then you just give them wipe down. As I've warned, you need to be quite thorough with wiping all the red dye off. Alright, so now I'm just going to use some white powder coating. Just and then let it develop for a bit. You want to try and get it so it's just come out of the freezer. Kind of like that, but not. But a bit more fruit. We still needs a tiny bit more.
You're basically looking for like sharp, bright pink lines, because that's
Yeah.
where the penetrant has
Okay.
disappeared down, and then you'll be able to see it. And those look pretty good to me.
think that was you, James.
Didn't even have any slides for us to read.
As we discovered, the spec for these, there wasn't actually a stack height for this gearbox. There's instead a torque setting for the preload, which is meant to be 140 newton meters, but as we measured it when we stripped down, didn't we, it was 90, so we're well below that, which means all of the Belleville washers and friction plates and steel plates go in the bin. Nice, we've got a fresh set here. So what we need to do, as you can see on that diagram there, we need to make a reverse of how we found these bits, yeah. So put that on there. Steel. Then have you got your picture of which way around the ramps go? We'll work it out.
Right.
Hopefully while you get your picture out it'll agree. So we're looking for 3390. It goes that way around, doesn't it? Yeah. So drop gears on the end of. So let me guess, it sits that way, so the acceleration ramps face the back of the car, because they're being thrust that way onto the cross pin. And if this sits that way in the car, then we'll want the ramps to be that way. Yeah, there you go. Does that make sense?
Yep.
If you can work out which way that sits in the car, so it sits that way, rotating forwards to drive the car forwards. So the acceleration ramps need to be facing back, so that they get accelerated into the crosspin. And then just for best practice, we put the ramps like that, so they're facing the windows.
Yeah.
So you can see. And now this is the very tricky part. Again, doesn't matter which way around these go, but it does matter which ramp you get these in. We'll just check that they're 3390. Obviously all four will be the same if you get one right, because they... There you go, just make sure they're seated like that. Next thing's next is the other ramp. Make sure we've got the 3390. And again, it's good practice to get the writing lined up with the writing. And then from there, we should be able to get 3, 2, 3 of those lined up. And then rotate this bad boy. There you go, so you've got those all lined up. So that's engaging all of those. I've got Belleville washer on here. Nice. And then all we need to do is wipe that surface so there's no oil sat on the top, and we'll wipe our hands while we're at it, so we're not introducing any extras. There we go. And we can pop that drop gear on top. And then what torque are we talking, these two?
102.
102 newton meters. The reason we're putting these in dry is because when we then go to finally assemble, we don't want any oil to be in the threads, so that the Loctite will then not cure. Go, and then we can put it up on here.
Does it matter what pattern I do it in? Or?
Yes, definitely, because it's like a clutch you're compressing. See how we've tightened those two and they've all gone, so they definitely need to be like a wheel nut. Cross pattern, but then and don't go too far, if that makes sense on each one. Okay, so the 102, let's set a torque wrench to like 80 and then click them all at 80 and then go to 102. So again, keep a mental note on. Keep a mental note where you started when you move. Happy?
Yep.
Right, let me just get the big 1/2 inch torque wrench out and then we'll just check the preload and then we can take all those bolts out and put fresh Loctite ones in.
Yep.
Yeah, right, so you want one of the bolts in, or two, yeah. Happy days. You can. Because you see where it says like 18, it's like 19 by 22.
Yeah.
Right, I need to go out and grab a package from Becky's office. In first. Do that bit. Some nice red rubber grease on. Into there. And then all these bearings just want some oil, and then we'll also red grease that seal there. That's the gearbox input seal. You can get plenty of red grease in there. Reverse gear, yes, reverse gear idling is to go in now. There it is. Chance. Definitely fresh bearings. There we go. One thing we forgot to do, we need to go and tighten the nuts up on these shafts, torque them down. Ta-da!
Hey.
Right, now whip that back on, reverse idler, Get some more gear oil, because just be careful of all that sealant as well. But you got to spin it around so that the that's it. Keep spinning till the thing engages, because you've got a key in there that engages with the oil pump drive. Line them up with the tracks in. Select where I probably will just drop in. Try to press it to. Okay, this is a bit of a juggling act, because you have to make sure everything's lined up, and you have to feel a little bit the bearings. Delightful. Right, start smashing those bolts in all of these. And then they want to be torqued to 22 again, don't they?